Hey everyone, good to be with you. Welcome into another week of Ask Mike. Our Courtney Mem's a little under the weather, so she's allowed me to fill in, and I get to sit here and see what kind of nonsense you're going to put out into the universe today. Mike, good to be with you again.
Okay, good to be here.
All right, let's start it off. Our first question this week is from T.L. Slayton, and he says, is there something wrong with me that I thought our guys played their butts off against Texas? Some are acting like it was the Ole Miss game part 2. Those two games were not close to the same.
There's nothing wrong with you, and I would agree with you, but I'm not going to get on the fans too hard the way some of them reacted because, as I've said before, what's going on this year is a lot about what's happened in the past. And we're at the point where a lot of these fans don't want to hear about a close game or a moral victory. They just want wins. And they're not happy with the way things have gone this year. So there's not much you can do about that. I do think this game was important for the players. After that Ole Miss game, I said to myself, this season could very easily crater like it did last year, real easy. And what had to happen in this game is the secondary had to bounce back. I was not buying that nonsense that they weren't talented enough or there was some scheme problem they had. I thought there was something going on mentally. And so Sam Pitman shook it up. He put different guys back there, and everybody played better. And when the secondary plays better, and what they did was they were covering receivers right off the ball. So Quinn Ewers, when he dropped back, wasn't able to release the ball in 1 second or 2 seconds like Jackson Dart was. And he was back there long enough that the D-line and linebackers could get to him, and they had several sacks in that game. That's important. You want to have that defense this week. I don't think the Louisiana Tech game is a shoe-in. They're playing pretty well right now. You can't overlook those guys. And then you got to go to Missouri and try to do something in that game. And then what happens if you just crater, and just lose? You maybe win the bowl, get to bowl eligibility, but you lose the Missouri game and lose a bowl game. Then it's still a bad situation. So I feel a lot better about the fact that the defense bounced back. Now they got to do it more than 1 week in a row, and we've seen things change from week to week. 1 week the offense plays well, and then the defense doesn't. It switches and all that. Now everybody's concerned about the offense. But my take on that game offensively was that Texas was the best defense they've played all year. I also think Taylor Green was a lot like he was the game where he came back after an off week and he'd been injured against Tennessee. I don't think
LSU.
he was,
the game
LSU game.
You're talking about.
I don't think he was 100%. I don't think he was quite as fast as he normally is, and I think that affected him some. But I'm not worried about the offense. I just think the defense had to bounce back.
Yeah, I don't think this was Ole Miss part 2 by any means. There definitely was a very big difference defensively, and we talked about this. There is no moral victories, but this team was better than they were 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and the players, even if you don't accept it as a fan, the players are affected by playing better. If you got to be able to see that, even if you're mad.
All right, Hunk Regnet wants to know what's going on with Pitman's surgery. Some seem to think he's going to retire because of it, but that's not what he said last week. At least that's not what I heard him say. Am I wrong?
That was confusing to me because it was pretty clear in the press conference, and then that got on the internet, so a lot of people were able to see it. But it was like some people were just, it was like what they thought he was saying is, I'm going to go have surgery when the season is over. And I guess they thought, he made it clear he was talking about the Missouri game. But they may have thought he was talking about after the bowl game, and then if that's happening, then he can't come back. There's too much time, and he has to be, they have to have somebody in place for recruiting. So those rumors started to spread all over the internet. Well, he's not going to be fired, that's for sure, but he's going to retire because of his hip. And I think he didn't say, I'm not going to retire, but he talked about being back at work on the 15th in time for the opening of that portal class. That's also when bowl practices start. So it doesn't sound like to me he's planning on not being around.
Yeah, and he said, according to him and what he has been told by his doctors, what he said is, I anticipate being able to walk out after surgery and be able to bounce back. It's very just uncomfortable right now, and so he wants to be able to get that surgery. And I think, I talked about this on the radio last week, that at the end of the day, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And so to speculate whether or not Pitman is going to retire, or if he's not going to retire, or if he's going to get fired at the end of the year, or what he's going to do because of this hip, and using this hip as this groundwork for Sam Pitman not being here next year, it's just wasted breath at this point. And you just have to wait and see what happens. But I don't think that what's going to happen with his hip is going to really dictate how things are going to play out these next couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens. Ash Giles says, are you willing to say that Pittman will definitely be back? With the way that they played Texas and bowl eligibility coming up on Saturday, it seems like to me it's a sure thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to get sucked into that again like I did after they beat Tennessee. I've learned my lesson. First of all, it's not a given that they'll beat Louisiana Tech. They should, but they might not if they.
You got to still play the football game.
You got to,
right?
And those guys are kind of on a roll right now. So we still remember that UAB game where they just came out not focused, and it was the defense that was bad in that game.
Yeah.
So I'm not willing to acknowledge until they get bowl eligible. I'm not willing to acknowledge they will be bowl eligible. And then I don't know what happens. If they got bowl eligible, but Tennessee blew them out, and then they got blown out in the bowl game, something could still happen. So I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to go that route.
Yeah. Again, things will happen the way that they're going to happen. They have 2 more regular season games left, potentially a bowl game, and so we're at least hopefully talking about football all the way through the entirety of December. All right, KY Hogg wants to know, what is the number one thing Taylen Green needs to do to help us win games that we've been losing? I say cut out all of the turnovers.
Well, that would be a good place to start, but that's not what I think the number one thing is. I think the number one thing is his decision making, which sometimes causes those turnovers. We've seen this happen all year, and I'm not saying he doesn't make good decisions, but he's inconsistent with it. I mean, there was a play that they ran against Texas, and the TV analyst picked it out right away. He started rolling right. He's got a receiver out off here to his right who was pretty much covered. Wasn't a lot of space there. But there was a hole a mile wide and 10 yards deep. Right, all he had to do was turn left and go upfield. He gained 20 yards, and he turned him through to the receiver, and I think it was a no gain. And that's what they were pointing out. He just does stuff like that. And I think the answer to that, and I'm not saying 100% that he's coming back. Sam Pitman on Monday was asked about, would he be back? Is he coming back? And he never used the name Taylen Green. He just said there's about 5 or 6 guys that have the ability to come back eligibility-wise that we want to come back, but we don't know. And he said, I'm sitting down with every one of them when the Missouri game is over, and I'm telling them, here's why we want you to come back. But he didn't address Taylen Green specifically. But if he comes back, I think that what Petrino does is he makes up a raw reel or whatever of every bad decision he made. Just put them back to back to back and let him look at it over and over again. I did this, I should have done that. And that should help in the off season, get your mind wrapped around it. Matt Jones, the former quarterback, I was on the radio with him this morning, and he said that he thinks it'll be night and day with Taylen Green next year. He's just assuming it'll be a lot better. I'm not 100% sure. This decision-making thing might be something that's just not in him. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that. But that's the only thing I can point to as how he could improve that, is to sit there and look at these bad decisions on tape over and over and over again and say, I made this mistake, I made that mistake. I can't do that.
And I think a part of that is obviously looking through your progression, because I love sitting beside DJ in the press box because his mind and the way that he sees things, obviously as a former player, is one that we don't look through. But we have watched, and it's like, you have Luke Hasdom wide open right there. If you'd have just found Luke, or you've got this receiver here. And I know that you say in these losses, cutting out all these turnovers, we talked about this on the Pictorial Show yesterday, and we made that graphic that he has had an interception in every single one of those losses. Mm-hmm. But then you look at that Texas game, and quite frankly, was that interception to Tyrone Broden his fault?
Yes, it was. It was Broden's fault.
Right? And so it bounced off his hands, and there were a couple like that. Some of them were blamed, but a lot of his interceptions have become of no fault to his own. And so I understand what KY Hogg is saying, but I think you make a much more valuable point that if he's making better decisions, he's not putting himself in bad places
to have turnover.
Exactly. All right, Hot Dogger says, why don't we get Taylen? Why Taylen keeps running behind the line of scrimmage when he's being chased by defenders. The offensive line isn't helping, but can't Petrino come up with a plan to keep us from getting smacked with yards lost?
I think a little bit of that question, and we can't ask these people what their mentality is when they put the question there, but I think a little bit of that has to do with what I talked about earlier. The fact that he played 2 times after a week's rest after an injury, and in both games, I don't think he was 100% speed-wise. And you may not look like it, but just a little bit can make a difference. So again, I think he looked like Texas got to him a lot of times when maybe they wouldn't have if he'd been a little bit quicker. It also depends on the defense. That's the best defense we've seen all year, and they were prepared for that. You could tell they were. As far as what Petrino could do, I think he will do and will continue to do what he's been trying to do all along, which is encourage Taylor Green to step up into the pocket because he doesn't do that enough. We saw some games where he did that. The LSU game started off until he had that disaster turnover inside the 5-yard line. Before that, he had been stepping up and finding receivers and doing as good a job as I've seen him. I think Petrino will still emphasize that in the offseason. You, instead of just immediately taking off and going left and right, and then peeling back around and using your speed to get around that pass rush, I think they will encourage him to step up and try to find a receiver. But I wouldn't want to see him give that up completely because he's had several huge runs this year where teams have come after him and he has to go backwards before he goes forward because he sucks them in and then goes around them.
Yeah, Pitman said this in the post-game press conference against Texas, that a lot of it has to do with him holding on the ball for too long and then Taylor turning the wrong direction. Like he should have turned left and he turned right and he hit the low instead of the high. And had he hit the high, but he'd have been able to have some positive yardage there. And again, it goes back to that decision making, right? So if he can kind of iron all of those things out, he is lethal with his legs. And the last thing I think you want to tell Taylor Green to do is to not run the football.
Exactly. You don't want to turn him into a classic drop back passer.
No, you don't. All right. Armand Abbey says, what do you think about the billboard somebody put up? I knew we were going to get this question. On the highway from Rogers saying Coach Pitman should quit. I guess the players saw it when the team was coming from their hotel back to the stadium.
I don't know if that's been 100% confirmed.
It is.
Okay.
It was real.
Okay.
Because
the billboard was real, but did they see it?
You drove right by it. So here's the deal. You drove right by it. The Texas, but I talked to an SID with Texas who used to work here.
So
she saw it. People saw it.
Yeah. Okay. What I think about it is that it's terrible. There's a way to express your opinions, but that's not the way to do it. And because of where they put it, the assumption is they wanted the players to see it. I don't know what whoever this was thought they would accomplish, but that was very in poor taste. Now, it does remind me of the time Houston Nutt, somebody rented a plane. This had to be way more expensive, and they had a banner behind it that said Fire Nutt, and they flew over the stadium before the game. That was stupid too. It's just amazing to me what some people are willing to do in order to express their opinions. I say, get on the internet if you want. If you want to do that, that's
there's enough opinions on the internet. We all
know
this.
But you don't need them on a billboard when the players
are driving
100%. But there's some good news to that, because when I went back and started reading all the reactions to that on the internet, both on Facebook and X, and even on Hogville, most of the people, I would say 9 out of 10, were very angry about that.
Well, I'm glad that's what showed up on yours. That's not what showed up on mine.
Well, the people reacted to what you put up there. You put up that why not spend your NIL money?
I said, what if you'd have just put this money towards the NIL?
Yeah.
And that's my opinion, because I think it was poor taste. And a lot of people were coming at me like, yeah, $650 isn't going to make a big difference. And my whole point to one, I'm allowed to have an opinion. Everyone's allowed to have an opinion. Everyone's allowed to spend their money however they want to. You want to attack me for my opinion and then throw your own opinion out there, that's fine too. But my point is the mentality of, if you don't think $650 is going to make a big difference, that's the problem with the NIL mentality that Arkansas has.
And you touched on an entirely different subject with that.
Right. So it's like, if you gave $650 and if you just gave 25 and 25 and 25, this whole mentality of, that amount of money is not going to make a difference, so I'm not going to give it, and it's a whole different conversation. But that's the reason why Arkansas's NIL is where it is right now, and Ole Miss's is where it is right now, because they're two different mentalities from a very similar fan base.
And on the internet anyway, you won't get many Razorback fans agreeing with that. They seem to have this aversion to NIL.
And I understand why.
They don't
I
like
think
it.
I just don't think it was presented to the fan base in a positive, exciting way. It was more of a forceful way. So now the university is trying to figure it all out and get that money rolling again. That's
Arkansas
not there right
has
now.
way too many fans that sit back and assume that the Tysons and the Hunts.
I had that too. It's like, oh, no one needs to do that. They've got
They're
Walmart,
gonna
Hunt,
do
and
that.
Tyson, and I'm like, guys.
I mean, the Hunts just gave a whole wad of money to the university, not
We're
necessarily
not
that.
giving to the. It's two very different
I
things.
know, but people look at that and they go, oh yeah, there's plenty of money around here. I don't have to do that.
It's the mentality.
And they've just not been able to convince fans, the average fan, a guy that doesn't even go to games, he's sitting at home. They got Ole Miss fans that are willing to send $20, $30, $40 a month, and Arkansas fans have rejected that notion. Now, as I've talked about with this revenue sharing thing that's supposedly coming up next spring, NIL will become less important, so maybe that won't be the issue it was before. But right now, and I'm told that, and I checked this out with several people close to what's going on over there, and I'm told that Hunter Yurachek understands that this next portal class, which opens the 15th, that's the last one where NIL is going to have a big effect. And he's prepared to give Pitman a lot of money to go after who he wants, because they got to do that for next year. It's the #1 priority. So that should be good news to fans.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, the Billboard thing was pretty wild, and hopefully it's gone. Vegas Hog says, over the past 2 seasons, Hogs are 1-6 in conference home games in Fayetteville. Do you have any insight as to what the issue might be and how the coaching staff might fix it?
Yeah, I want to start off by talking about something that virtually no one talks about when they talk about this alleged Pitman poor performance at home. They don't look at when those games start. Okay, let's forget going back last year. Let's go all the way back to Pitman's first season.
In 2020.
In 11 a.m. starts, Arkansas is 2-8 in conference home games with those 11 a.m. starts, but they're 2-1 in night games and 3-1 if you include the 2021 Texas game, which was an equivalent of a conference game. So you see, it's a totally different thing when they play at night. Anybody that's ever been to a football game, most places, but we can only talk about Razorback Stadium because we're not at these other places very often. 11 a.m. games are not good for the home team. But why do they take place? They take place because the TV people look at a game and say, even if the opponent is good, if they don't consider you good, okay, this is not an interesting game. We're going to put it in at 11 a.m. or 10 o'clock Eastern time. And that's just been what's happened all during Pitman's his time here. And it happened this year. So, number one, they're not getting enough night games at home anyway. Certainly, it's not just that they're not getting conference night games, they're not getting night games, period. There are years in which they had no night games. None.
Yeah.
So, this is because of them, the network people looking at Arkansas and saying, nah, it's boring. They're not good enough for a night game. And the only solution to that problem is get good enough where they'll put you up there.
It's all reciprocal.
I don't think it's something where Pitman can't coach and win games. I think it's when the games are played.
Interesting. I think you said 9 conference home games at 11 a.m.
9
conference home games since he's been here.
They've lost 9. And they've won. Oh no, they've had 9 conference at 11, and they've had just 2 night games, 3 if you include Texas in 2021.
Yeah, there are other factors. Oh, sorry, that's part of your question.
We have to provide a written script for this
WV Hog fan says, I need to highlight the question part. La Tech has played some big name schools close this year. Is there a chance that we may not take them seriously? We have a history of not playing well against lesser known opponents.
Well, I would disagree that they have that they've played several big name schools close. They have played a lot of close games. In fact, they haven't gotten blown out all year, and they've only won 4 games. But mostly what they're losing, and they've got 2 overtime losses and a double overtime loss, but those are to mid-major schools. They've only played one Power 4 conference school, and that was North Carolina State. That was a 30-20 game, and North Carolina State is 5-5, and they got literally hammered by Tennessee and Clemson. So what does this all mean? Well, I can only go by what Sam Pitman said on Monday when he was talking about them, and he said he's concerned about them defensively because they run this 3-4-5 defense. That fifth guy in the backfield in the secondary is a rover. Said he's a really good player and he's capable of really disrupting an offense. So they got to make sure he's blocked, that they get to him, that they scheme around him or whatever. So that's one thing he's worried about. And then with their offense, they're coming off only their 4th win of the season, and it was a 12-7 win over Western Kentucky. But he said, if you look at what they're doing, they've started to run the ball more. And the word on them most of this year was that they've got fast receivers and a good quarterback, so they can move the ball through the air, but they don't have much of a running game. He said now they're starting to develop a running game, and if they have a balanced offense, that's going to put more pressure on our defense. So he wants that defense to be aware of that. Now the issue is, how does he convince them of that? And the only thing you can do and hope is that these guys have enough sense to know that this is a bowl-eligible game. This isn't like UAB. This game gets you bowl-eligible, so we have to hope they'll be focused.
It extends your football season, so it definitely carries some weight. All right, referencing the Rocket Sanders last-second touchdown run to beat Missouri, what do you think, Foosman? Foosman says, crazy how a lot of our contributing players leave and find success elsewhere. This seems subjective to me.
Yeah, well, this is what you find on the internet.
Yeah.
So Rocket does this, and not everybody reacted that way, but this guy wants to turn it into, you should have kept him. You know, you got rid of him, and then he got better because our coaching staff is bad.
I don't think you say you got rid of him. He left.
Well,
Arkansas didn't get rid of him.
No,
but he left.
I didn't say that. I'm thinking.
No, that's what I'm saying. What fans are saying.
Well,
Arkansas didn't
this particular fan just seems to be thinking, okay, he left and he got better. That was his reaction to this. My reaction to this is because I understand how the transfer portal works. Some guys are going to leave and be better. Some guys are not. What about KJ Jefferson? He didn't get better by leaving. But you can also look at a Pooh Paul. Pooh Paul leaves here. He got better, but he was good already. And a lot of people are mad at him because he went to Ole Miss. I don't look at stuff that way. Pooh Paul's a really good guy. His dad's a good guy. For whatever reason he decided to leave, instead of being mad at him, just go, okay. Because Arkansas pulled some people in from other places. I mean, there's all this talk that LSU is going to have mass people leaving after what's happened to them the last couple of weeks. Arkansas may be able to get some of their people coming in next year. So that's just the way the portal works. My reaction.
It's just always the argument of you can't, it taketh and it giveth, right?
Yes.
Like you got Landon Jackson from LSU, you got Taylon Green from Boise State, you got Drew Sanders from Alabama, you got Danico Slaughter and Addison Nichols from Tennessee. It goes both ways.
Yeah,
and so there are fan bases on that side going, oh, look at Landon Jackson. We should have kept him down here in Death Valley or whatever.
My reaction, and I was watching that game when I saw, and by the way,
I was happy for him. I got excited.
That game looked like it was going to overtime.
Yeah.
Because it was tied, and he was down on about the 7-yard line, and it looked like they're probably going to have to try to kick. It wasn't tied. They were going to try to kick a field goal.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it's going to come down to a field goal. And then all of a sudden, from about the 8 or 9 yard line, he just ran over about 6 people and scored, and it's suddenly over. And my reaction was, okay, you're not here anymore, but you sure made a lot of Razorback fans happy with what you just did.
Yeah.
And maybe some of that was his own frustration from being here against Missouri because he finally won a game at Missouri.
Yeah, and he's had quite a career in college with injuries, even at South Carolina, banged up a little bit. And so, again, sometimes I think Jalen Catalon is a really good example, too, where as much as I loved covering Jalen here at Arkansas, injury prone, he just needed new scenery. And I think that was something that Rocket was just like, I think I just need some new scenery.
Yeah, and then he went to Texas and left there, and now he's at Vegas.
UNLV doing great. So, again, some people have reasons for leaving, but, you got to love to see these guys have success. And I know it can drive you crazy, but it's not anything to lose some sleep over.
Nope. it's just a new world. With
It
the
is.
portal, that's the
It
way.
is.
Now, the portal, I think portal activity is going to go down under this new revenue sharing thing. It
Yeah.
won't go away, but it'll be
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll see.
If it wasn't for the portal, Mike, John Calipari wouldn't have a basketball
I
team.
know.
So,
And I think once this all changes, you're not bringing in 6, 7 people out of the portal for basketball. You might bring in 3. And you're not bringing in 25 players in football. You might bring in 15.
Like you used to.
Like it used to be.
Like you used to. All right, Marty Bird's Proxy says, Sark made a comment about Darryl Royal and our dislike for the Horns. I always considered Royal one of the good guys. Do you have the same opinion, and was this due to his friendship with Frank?
Yeah, I do have the same opinion, and I think talking to some of those Razorback fans when I first got here, I do think they were influenced by the fact that it was well known that those two coaches went on vacation with each other. Their wives were friends. They used to play these marathon golf games together because they both liked to play golf. But none of that influenced me early on, because going all the way back to when I think I was in maybe late elementary school, early junior high when Royal took over at Texas. And even though I didn't like the Longhorns, my initial impression of him was always good, because he just seemed, when I would see him on TV, he was just different. He wasn't arrogant. There wasn't anything jerky about him. He was just a plain homespun type guy from Oklahoma that seemed to be a good guy. And then when I took the job here, they still had this thing called the Southwest Conference Press Tour, which is different from media days. Media days, you all go to one place and the players and the coaches come to you. And the press tour, you went to them. You signed up, you paid money, you got on a plane from here and flew to Lubbock, then you covered Texas Tech, then you got on a plane and flew to Houston and you covered Texas Tech, and then everything else was on a bus. And every day you went to a new school. And every time we went to Austin, he was one of the nicest guys you would ever be around. And then there was this thing where when everybody got their work done in the afternoon, then each school would take you out to whatever the big shot restaurant was, and they'd feed you and you'd have a good time, and then you'd go back to this media hospitality room, and then that's when some of the coaches would come in and hang out, not all of them. Darryl Royal would come in and just sit there and talk to guys, and it didn't matter whether and I was like, I'd been doing this for 1 or 2 years. I was like, I was kind of scared to talk. And he was just such a nice guy. Yeah. And I always said he was too good for Texas, because here's what happened. They, being the snooty highbrows that they are, when he became AD, very briefly, they looked at him and went, he's too much of a yokel to be an AD. We got to get a smart AD, because they didn't like the fact that he hung around with all these country music stars and he had all this homespun wisdom and stuff. He just wasn't cool enough for him. And so they forced him out.
That sounds cool, though.
I
want to hang out with country music stars.
But that wasn't the image that athletic department wanted. So they got rid of him, and they got these other guys that were all more like what they wanted, academic types. And look at the difference, because Frank went on to be athletic director longer than he was a head coach. And people accepted that from him.
Frank did a lot for the university as an AD in terms of facilities and
Darryl
getting into
Royal
the SEC and all of those things.
Darryl Royal could have done more to erase this image that a lot of people ask me, why do Razorback fans dislike them so much? I think it's because they dislike their fans. I've been around their fans back when I was a kid growing up in Lubbock at Jones Stadium. Most fans, I was around all of those fans, because the tickets I had when I was junior high school, they were cheap tickets, usually somewhere around the other team's fan base. Eddie Lynn, who asked a lot of questions, who's been my friend since the 4th grade. He was a Razorback fan, and he always looked forward to going to Jones Stadium when it was that every other year that the Razorbacks, because he would buy tickets right in the middle of the Razorback section. And I've sat there with him, and he would talk about Arkansas and know as much about Arkansas as they did, but what those Arkansas fans liked was he knew about Texas Tech, so he would tell them all this stuff about Texas Tech. And they were just good people. It was just conversation back and forth. When I'm sitting there next to these Texas fans, they're saying stuff like, man, I can't believe people live around here. This is ugly. We at least get to go home when this game is over. These poor people have to live out here in this mess. It's pitiful, and all that kind of stuff. So that was the kind of thing that turned me off, and I think that's the way the Razorback fans are typically. Darryl Royal could have done a lot to change that image. We're not snooty. We don't think we're better than you. We're just a good team. We're trying to win like everybody else.
Yeah, well, we'll never know. All right, Rob Any arc.
Northeast Arkansas is the way I look at it. Rob, Northeast Arkansas, that's the way I see it.
Does the U of A have the ability to take attendance at games to see if ticket holders are going to games more times than not? It's frustrating not to be able to buy tickets, then turn the TV on and see thousands of empty seats.
Now, this has to be a basketball question.
It better be a basketball
He didn't specify, because that hasn't been happening in football this year. But it has been happening at basketball. And what he's talking about is this first game against Lipscomb. It was the first official game for Cal. But he had that game, that exhibition game against Kansas, and that was full. And I think a lot of people took the idea, okay, that was the first game. So then this next one comes around, well, it's Wednesday night. And Wednesday nights are typically not a good night for Razorback fans' attendance at Bud Walton. In fact, I wish they wouldn't have them. They'd move them to Thursday or Tuesday or something. And so what happened there was about 7,000 fans showed up, and then about 3,000 of them left before the end of the game because they wanted to get out to their cars, and the game was still on the line. And I think he was a little bit miffed about that. The people I talked to didn't say, well, he didn't express anger. He was more surprised. Is this what's typical? And so you got a lot of fans. This was a back and forth thing among fans toward each other. You got a lot of fans saying to some of these other fans that were saying it's okay, what are you talking about? We got a Hall of Fame coach. This is the first Hall of Fame coach we've ever hired. We've had some that became Hall of Fame after they got here. He came here already as a Hall of Fame, and this is what you're going to do, just kind of show up like when you want to? This is pitiful. So to his question, what do you do about that? I figure with electronic tickets, the athletic department, if they wanted to, could
they know who scans and what's not scanned.
But what point would that be? You can't tell somebody to go to the game or not go to the game. They do have a program in place where if you're not going, they encourage you to give your ticket numbers and all that to them, and they will make sure. And I don't think they sell these. I don't think they double sell them. I think they make sure that somebody that wants to go to the game, can't afford it, goes to the game. But not everybody does that. So I don't think that's going to make a difference. I would point out that the following Wednesday against Troy, there was a bigger crowd. It was more like 12, 13,000, and they were more into the game, and they stayed longer. You didn't see all these people leaving at the end like the other one. Yeah. So now the question is, and we always have this problem on Monday when we tape it, because there's an event coming up after we do this tonight, tonight to us, with Pacific.
Right.
And so what's the attendance going to be there? Some of the excuses have been, well, these teams aren't any good or they're no name. Well, Pacific, yeah, you go, who's that? Well, I think it was Andrew Hutchinson wrote the thing that I read, and kudos for him for coming up with the research on that they're actually 4-0 against teams, colleges from Arkansas. They've beaten Arkansas Fort Smith, they've beaten Arkansas Little Rock, they've beaten Arkansas State and Arkansas Pine Bluff. So the only one left is Arkansas. So can they pull it off? Yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
But I also think too, at this point in time with this team, wouldn't you just want to go see this team play in person?
Yes, to me, I would, and especially if it's Cal. So that's a little bit, maybe some of it is they're not just running over people and they've already lost a game and all this stuff. Maybe some of that. Maybe it's something left over from football where they're going, oh my goodness, we were supposed to be good, and now they've already lost this game to Baylor and blah, blah. I don't know what it is, but I would expect the crowds to be bigger.
That's a little bit of an overreaction, but yeah. All right, last question. Here we go. Hoggy Style 78 wants to know, what is the latest news on Brazil's injury in Adu? Is he still not 100%? Our front court lacks depth. We need those guys back healthy. Did Cal make a mistake only going 9 deep?
First of all, I don't think there's been a press conference since the Troy game. Nope. So there's nobody to say, yeah, Brazil's okay, he's going to play, or Adu may not play, or he will play. We only know what Cal said after the game, and he said Adu is just, he's still not, he said he's healed, but it's more like you got to get used, you're going to have some pain still.
You got to get back to playing shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brazil, he said he didn't know it was an ankle injury. He wasn't sure what he could say about that. So should he have maybe offered less NIL money, less big NIL money to a few concentrated players and tried to get 10 or 11 players in here? I don't think so. And I realize that, look, you got to look at the way this guy plays in his history. His history is to have guards and a power forward and then maybe 2 or 3. He's going to play 2 guys, maybe 3 inside, move them in and out. And I think he thought he had what he needed. But you always take a risk with that, with injuries. And right now, let's say Brazil can't play against Pacific, and let's say that Adu is still not looking very good, then that throws it all on Zvonimir and Ivisic. I just should learn to call him Big Z.
There you go.
But it could put it all on him.
But it's specific, and quite frankly, what are you doing playing Trevor in Brazil and Jonas Adu right now if you don't have to?
Yeah, maybe, unless they're better than we think they are. I mean,
maybe.
Stuff keeps happening.
Sure.
Maybe they'll go into this game
and also, too, I think with this, it's like, okay, yeah, you can split that NIL money, maybe bring in a few more guys, but then what if these guys don't get hurt? Then you've got guys who are just
and why do you say, you're going to say, well, I don't want to bring in, I don't want to bring in some of the guys I had last year at Kentucky. I'll let them stay at Kentucky or go somewhere else. I don't want to get what's his name? John L. Davis. The shooter. I'm not going to spend enough to get him because everybody wanted that guy because of his 3-point shooting. I just don't. I think diluting that and not getting the quality players that he was getting would have been a mistake. So my answer to this is I think he did the right thing. You just have to cross your fingers and hope you don't get a couple of your inside guys injured.
Right. And that's kind of where it goes. It's just you're always playing that NIL or no NIL money, right? You take NIL away, you put a roster together thinking that I've checked every box that I need to check to have a team that has success, and then you go into said season and now you don't have a quarterback, now you don't have a point guard. Like, things are going to happen. And so it's never money or no money. Yeah, it's never going to be a sure thing. Or you've got guys who aren't going to play who are really, really talented and are never going to play because they're behind guys who are just a little bit better than them.
Which brings to mind, and this wasn't a question, but I'm interested in it. What do you think about Cal's pressers? Because there was one Arkansas fan that I thought did the dumbest thing he could have possibly done. He took little 1-second clips out of one of his pressers and made him look like a dodo. And then the Kentucky people got that and showed it next to Mark Pope and made him look smart and Cal look dumb, which is not fair at all.
Yeah.
My reaction to most of his press conferences, in fact, all of them, is he gives us a lot of information. He's kind of funny, but not hilarious. You're not dying laughing, but he does talk.
But he makes eye contact with people, which is nice.
Yeah, and some of it's funny, like he was talking, and then he looked and he said, "Are there not any more questions?" And Bob Holt said, "Well, you got to stop talking for us to ask another question." There's little things like that, but he didn't get mad about it.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to say. You and I were used to Muss's press conferences. Now, you may like Muss, you may like what he did. I'm not going to say anything about that. We didn't like his press conferences. He was very moody. He'd get all mad about things and wouldn't talk. You couldn't get him to address certain subjects. He would pout. And I haven't seen that. And I've seen a lot of press conferences, a lot of different styles over the years.
Sure.
A lot of different coaches. Yeah. I like Cal about as well as anybody.
Yeah,
because
it's been nice. It definitely has the first couple of games. And I will say this, because we're in this industry, right? We edit things every day. I could take a press conference from Mike Pope and make him look stupid.
Sure, you
right?
could.
Like I could make a press conference with.
So what was it?
Anybody.
This was in Arkansas. What was he doing? Thought it would just be funny?
Maybe funny. Yeah, and sometimes you think that things are comical, and obviously Kentucky fans or whoever fans are just going to grasp onto something and have a field day with it, and that's what social media is all about. But like, you can edit anything to make anything look like whatever.
This is going to go on all year until the Kentucky game is played.
February 1st. Here we go. Rep Arena.
You're going to have all these Kentucky media and all their fans join. Aha, we tried to tell you, we like you. That's what they want to come across as. We're so concerned about you, and we really want to help you. Because we've been down this road and you're dopey. You don't understand. You're fixing to walk off and fall into this hole, and we're trying to say, whoa, wait a minute. So what do they think we're going to do? Go over to Yurichek's office and pound on the door and say, no, unhire him.
Oh, my gosh.
Come on.
Oh, my gosh.
Come on.
It just makes basketball season more exciting. This
Yeah.
was fun. Thanks for letting me fill in with
Sure.
you. I appreciate it. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next week.